Welcome everyone to the next episode of the Warsaw Institute program. Today it is my pleasure to host Mr. Kacper Kita, expert on French international and French politics from Nowy Ład. Welcome.
Hello, welcome everyone.
Today we are going to talk about presidential elections in France, and my expert will try to answer the question of who will win the second round. Just a brief reminder, the second round of the presidential elections in France will be held on Sunday, this Sunday, 24th, 4th of April. And in the first round, I have some top results, top three results. We have Emmanuel Macron with 27.8%. We have Marine Le Pen, the second result, 23.1%, and Jean-Luc Mélenchon with 22%. And the first question I will have to my guest is it kind of a surprise for you, or did you expect this?
It's not a surprise to see a rebuttal of second round with Macron and Le Pen because we had the same second round 5 years ago. But in the background, I would argue we have a small but stable revolution in French politics because during after the Second World War, basically, France was governed either by the center left or the center right. These two main political blocs had 56% combined even 10 years ago, and back in the good old days, they had even 90% of the votes. 10 years ago, as I said, we had 56, and now the two candidates of the two parties that have governed France for the last 60 years until 2017 combined got just 6.5% combined. The center-right candidate got 4.8% and the socialist candidate got 1.7%. So it's really experience the emergence of a new political scene in France, where we have so-called far right, or I would argue the national right, basically the right wing, which is increasing and increasing its result with every 5 years. Marine Le Pen had 21% 5 years ago, 17 10 years ago. Now she got 23%, but with even more to the right rival, Eric Zemmour. They got together over 30% have now voted in France for the so-called far right or for the national camp. Then we have Macron, who had monopolized the old establishment, both in terms of politicians and in terms of voters, because 5 years ago Macron had much more votes from right wing, left wing. Protest votes from young people, and now he sucked up almost all the votes from people who would go vote for the old center right and center left. And third camp, we have the left with Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who also got the best result for a far left candidate after the Second World War in a presidential election. And he also managed to mobilize a lot of Muslim voters, because the Muslim voters usually did not vote, and now they did go to the polls and they voted. 70% of them voted for Mélenchon. So we really have this tripartite new political scene in France that is, I think, unique in Europe.
You mentioned that this is the new political situation in France right now, and we have to mention, if we talk about the new situation in French politics, new persons in French politics, we have Eric Zemmour, who, let's call it quite unexpectedly, took part in these elections, and he gained 7% of the vote as I look at my paper and stats here. And the first question I have to you is, how do you rate this result? I know you are also the author of the book about Eric Zemmour, so I would like to ask you about ask you for your evaluation of this result. And also, the second question I will have in this part is the transition of electorate of votes. On both sides, because we have, let's call it central left, Emmanuel Macron, who might get votes from Mélenchon or not. You will explain that. And at the same time, we have Eric Zemmour, who had the fourth result, right? And I wanted to ask about the transition of possible transition of votes from Zemmour to Le Pen or Mélenchon to Macron.
Sure. So, starting with Zemmour, yes, indeed, I'm an author of the first non-French biography of Zemmour because he he was the most read journalist, writer, essayist. I think would be the best way to put it in France. Political essayist. He wrote a lot of books about French politics, French history, French culture, and then he ran for president now mm, with a very right-wing program, with a program focused on culture war, on immigration, on Islam, on countering Islam. He wanted to create a big right-wing camp in which he would unite the old post-Gaullist camp, the old center-right that ruled France for 40 years, and Marine Le Pen's camp, the camp created by her father and now continued by her. And well, he managed to achieve only one of these two goals because he managed to beat the Gaullist candidate, Valérie Pécresse, who got less than 5% of the vote, and he mainly took votes from the Gaullists because he managed to take votes from the bourgeoisie, from the middle and upper class Frenchmen who are fed up with Islam, with what they view as the Islamization of France, and in a broader view, with the degradation of the French power, French state, French society. But he did not manage finally to take votes from Marine Le Pen. To a degree, also because Marine Le Pen in last week's there was a big hype about Jean-Luc Mélenchon uniting all the left and voters and also mobilizing Muslims, and therefore people from Le Pen's campaign would say that, oh, you Zemmour voters need to vote for Marine, otherwise Mélenchon will get to the second round, which was turned out to be true. Well, we had a lot of other problems. Basically, Le Pen reached out better to the normal voter, to people from the working class, basically, who formed the core of her electorate. When it comes to the third and fourth candidates and their votes, let's say, well, the more voters will almost all of them back Le Pen. It will be over 75%, perhaps even 85, depending on different polls, though she now focuses on mobilizing other groups because she basically thinks that people for whom immigration and Islam are a top priority will vote for her anyway. This was her calculation from the start, different than Zemmour's. And when it comes to Mélenchon, it's more tricky because for Mélenchon, very different people voted. We had, as I said, we had Muslims, we had leftists from different political tribes, like the people for whom ecology is very important, people for whom LGBT issues are very important, but also working class Frenchmen for who are very anti-capitalist. But also some leftist intelligentsia, but also quite a lot of young people for whom it was a protest vote against the status quo. A lot of young people voted either for Mélenchon or for Marine Le Pen in the first round, and Le Pen tried to conquer the young people and the working class electorate of Mélenchon, while Macron would try to get basically the leftist intelligence, the people for whom ecology and LGBT issues are the most important, and obviously Muslims. But and now both candidates have been trying to mobilize these different groups or neutralize the groups that could vote for the other candidate. Uh, and this was how these 2 weeks basically looked like.
Mhm. And before we come back to the polls, before the second round, I will have another question to you about Macron and Le Pen and yesterday's debate, which was before the second round of the elections. There was the debate, and the French media says that Macron was aggressive, more aggressive, but at the same time, Le Pen was better prepared to the debate. Do you agree with this?
If you had to simplify, surely Macron was more aggressive than Le Pen, and certainly Le Pen was better prepared than 5 years ago because 5 years ago she had a quite weak performance at the debate, and now it was obvious that she is very focused on presenting herself as competent as responsible. I think that during this debate, we basically saw that Le Pen doesn't think that French people want to vote for her. They need more bantering about Islam identity, immigration, issues with which she's nevertheless associated. But she tried to credibilize herself, to gain credibility as a candidate who's normal, rational, competent, and she tried to present herself as the candidate of normal people, of people outside Paris, of working class, of agriculture, so people from the countryside, etc., etc. While Macron tried to present herself, to attack her as incompetent, attack her as far right, attack her as someone whose measures on immigration and Islam could lead to a civil war, which she said explicitly, and attacking her as an anti-European Union, though Le Pen changed her position from 5 years ago, and now she's in favor of the EU, but she wants to reform it, and she calls it Europe of Nations, referring herself to de Gaulle. And I think that neither of them won decisively. Le Pen managed to present herself as more normal and competent than 5 years ago, and she will certainly get much more votes. But because of the fact that Macron also well managed to attack her and managed to fend off most of her attacks, there was no KO for neither side. I think that Macron stays a favorite. Although we will see, to what degree this normalizing strategy, this dédiabolisation of Marine Le Pen will actually work. We will see that on Sunday.
So the debate was not that beneficial, that much beneficial for neither of sides. But I would like to quote another stat from Ipsos Supra Steria poll, which shows Macron before the second round of the elections. We have Macron who would win with 56% of votes. And I would like to ask you the title question of our today's program. So, who will win the second round of the elections, and what are your predictions based on what you know, what you observe, also based on the latest events, the debate, and the whole campaign? What do you think?
Well, I think Macron is still the favorite. I would predict a closer result, something like 54 to 46, but maybe 53 to 47. But nevertheless, I think Macron stays the favorite. Although we will see what happens because pollsters did not predict the pollsters predicted the trends accurately uh, before the first round, but they did not predict the actual results uh, point to point. So we will see about that. But well, Macron is indeed the favorite. They have been trying different tactics because Marine Le Pen was much more aggressive 5 years ago, and well, it didn't turn out well for her. now she spent these 2 weeks trying to mobilize the working class, trying to mobilize people in smaller villages, smaller towns. I think it's also important to stress the age differences in voting, because Le Pen would probably win if only Frenchmen under 65 or 70 voted, because in these younger age categories, it's 50-50, or a small advantage of Marine Le Pen by a few percentage points. And while basically pensioners are older than 65 or 70, they are in some polls even 70-30 for Macron, and they are the most mobilized group. They are the most the group that votes the most, and that is most sure of its vote. And we have really big differences in turnout. People who are old turnout have like 80% or even 80 plus percent turnout, and younger people can have like 60%. So it's a big difference. So for now, I think that Macron is a favorite, because still Le Pen did not manage to de-diabolize herself among the most old voters, who still remember her father and still associate the name Le Pen and the so-called far right with something terrible that would destroy France, something that some threat that cannot be allowed. But I think these step by step attitude by Marine Le Pen makes her position quite strong, and I would not exclude a surprise, even though Macron stays in favorite.
And of course, we know that also from the yesterday debate that if Macron wins, he will continue this European policy of a great friendship with Germany. But at the same time, if Le Pen wins, there might be a chance of building this anti federal coalition within the European Union. And my question to you is, how do you assess these chances if, in the case Le Pen wins, right? Of what are the chances of actually reforming the EU in this sense, or how would this change in Paris influence European Union, in your opinion?
I think if this is a very big difference between the two candidates, that is often not not that much stressed upon, because of the fact that we have a war in the east, which we will also mention probably later on in our conversation. And obviously, everyone talks about Russia, but few people talk about Germany. And on Germany, the division between the two candidates is enormous, because Macron is in line of French-German couple of France building a more and more integrated European Union. He's in favor of what he calls European sovereignty. It was one of the topics of disagreement between them yesterday, because Le Pen said that there's no such thing, there will never be such a thing as a European nation, and therefore there's no such thing as a European sovereignty. That she's concerned about French sovereignty. She doesn't care about European sovereignty because it's something abstract that doesn't actually exist. And if and also during the last months, also going back many years, Le Pen has been very steadfastly anti-German, in the sense that she has openly stated that Germany is the biggest threat to French sovereignty. That France can live up with Russia, with the US, with China, but Germany for now is the country that has been dominating France for many years, that has been dominating it both politically and economically and technologically, and therefore she wants France to build an anti-German and anti-unionist coalition, anti-federalist coalition at the same time inside the European Union. It is one of the reasons she approached the Polish government, Polish right wing and center wing during this last year, and she also tried to tip top on Russia to uh, this one thing, and the second thing is that she nuanced her approach to the European Union. She stopped discussing leaving the EU. Now she just wants to reform it from the inside, therefore becoming a political partner both for Polish government but also for Viktor Orban, who won the election last month a few weeks ago, and also she's been building ties with the Italians who have their own election next year.
And right now, let's ask the question which should be asked, I believe, because as you already said, there is a war in the East which has been waged for over 2 months now. And we have lots of rumors about Russia ties. If we talk about Marine Le Pen, but we can talk about both of the candidates. We heard lots of Le Pen's loans in Russian banks. But in the other hand, we have Macron, who he is in a close friendship with Germany, which is also in good or maybe not that bad relations with Putin right now because of energy supplies, basically. So my question to you is. What is the approach of both candidates to the Russian Federation, especially right now during the war in Ukraine?
Uh, Obviously, Marine Le Pen has been a candidate that has been accused of ties with Russia. We know that she had this topic did come out during yesterday's debate because Macron tried to present her as a Putin candidate, while she said that there's no big difference between her and Macron. Uh, he he said that he talked about this loan that you mentioned. This was a loan in 2015, a loan before the previous presidential election, when Marine Le Pen took a loan in a Russian bank, and she said she explained that, and she explains this to this day that well, no French bank wanted to give her a big loan before the election because of her being ostracized for her political views. And now, before this election, she took a loan from a Hungarian bank, for which also Macron attacked her yesterday, because of Orban's ties to Russia. Therefore, Le Pen was very openly pro-Russia during many years. She acknowledged Crimea's annexation, for example, back in 2014. Although she also said, which she mentioned yesterday, that Ukraine should be independent, she said both from the EU, the US, and from Russia, in the sense that, well, she would prefer Ukraine to stay a neutral country. Then she would put much effort into building a relationship with Putin, which she met 5 years ago before the elections. But now, well, she's been treating obviously the Russia folder the same way she has been treating other topics that turned out to be toxic, like Islam or immigration or EU or LGBT issues. She has backed off some of her or her father's or her party's previous claims. She has been tiptoeing this topic during the last few months, especially since the war started, since Russia invaded Ukraine. And now she says that she's in favor of all sanctions, just except for the uh, full embargo uh, on Russia on Russian energy. And she also attacked Macron for example, for allying with Germany. And she said that Germany is much more dependent on Russian oil than France is, and that it was stupid from Germany. She said that, yeah, this yesterday. So she's been trying to find ways to turn this topic around to present Macron and
Mhm.
Germany as the ones being responsible for Russia's aggression, because she said that, well, it's Macron who's been in power for 5 years. It's Macron who has been, making Putin visit Versailles with great honors. The moment he became president, Putin was the first to visit Macron after he became president in 2017. And it's true that Macron has been for many years, during this whole term, he had this approach of what the French call this hand turned over to Russia, in the sense that he tried to make Russia a partner because he wanted to become less dependent on the Americans, and he wanted Russia to become the EU partner, similar to Germany, so that EU and Russia would work together, and together they would be more independent both from the US and from China. But now with the war, Macron has been supplying Ukraine with arms, and he's been supporting sanctions, which Le Pen says that she would also do, and she said that
Mhm.
she even said yesterday, which was a sign that she wanted to, as I said before, she present herself as a mainstream candidate in her attitude to Russia. But she said that she applauds all the efforts by the current French government and by Macron in what he's doing for Ukraine.
And another case in international affairs or international policy, and Marine Le Pen, because she's openly in favor of France leaving NATO. And the question I have to you is, do you think that in just a possible situation, if Le Pen was the president of France right now, and France would left the NATO, the Polish situation, the situation of the whole eastern flank would be whole different, would be worse, we would be more in danger because of that?
Le Pen doesn't want to leave NATO.
Mhm.
She is in favor of leaving France leaving the NATO Strategic Command, which is the same thing that de Gaulle did in 1966, and which was the policy of France for the next 43 years until 2009, when President Sarkozy came back to NATO's to full participation in NATO. She said that if she wins, even though she will leave military command, she will still be an ally of the US and other countries, and that she would be and that she would treat the she said that Article 5 would still be something France would still abide by it. The only difference would be that France wants to be more independent of America. Uh, Obviously, it would be a tricky thing to do now, and she said that she will not do it as long as the war in Ukraine is in place. Therefore, it's we don't know if she would actually do it, because if she became president, because we don't know for how long this war will last. But going back to your question, no, I don't think it would be a big damage for Poland's security, because Le Pen has also said that she would be willing um, to help Poland. She would be willful. She would be willing, for example, to send French soldiers to Poland. Therefore, I think it would be obviously not nice for Ukraine and for the US, but I think that Le Pen would try to balance somehow her alliance with Poland and her policy towards Russia, which would obviously be very difficult.
And going back at the very end of our conversation, going back to the main topic of our today's program, I would like to ask you from Polish perspective, when we look at these elections, the election in France right now, which candidate, if being chosen, would work better for the Polish national interest, or which candidate would fit better in this geopolitical framework of the Polish international policy?
I think that they both have shortcomings and they both have some uh, good sides. Obviously, the division between who's a better candidate reflects the bigger division about in Poland about defining Polish national interest. But I think that in Poland, that Poland's national interest is both in countering Russia, but also in preserving Polish national sovereignty inside the European Union.
Mhm.
Therefore, I think that that Le Pen would be a bit better candidate for Poland because because she's put much effort into building a relationship with the Polish government, which Macron has been attacking at the same time, and uh, she's staunchly against EU federation. She's staunchly she'll obviously be a very powerful partner in mm, against German imperialism. And well, I think with the current situation in place, we would be able to force her hand not to concede too much to Russia because of the all because of we can deduct this from the way she's been reacting to this crisis. She won't. I don't believe Le Pen is some Russian agent who would do anything Putin says. It's absurd. But I also believe that Macron, who's the favorite, who will probably win, is also a
Mhm.
pragmatic partner who's been also able to work with the current Polish government despite these ideological and political differences, with whom we will also be able to work if he does win.
So we still have 3 more days to find out who is going to be the next president. And my and your guest was Mr. Kacper Kita, expert on French and international politics from Nowy Ład. Thank you so much. I always appreciate your expertise.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Thanks to all the listeners, and see you again in the future.
Thank you so much.